Well, hello. It's your buddy JT again, and I have another treat for you guys. I was on the Firmamental Podcast, and again, we were talking short season of Satan, and I thought you guys would enjoy it. The stream did not work once again, but again, these guys were nice enough to share the recording with me, and now I'm going to share with you guys. God bless.
Well, hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Firmamental Podcast with your boys, Alex and Raul. I got a guest tonight that I'm so excited to have on. We'll introduce tonight's guest in just a moment, but I wanted to remind you guys, go check out the website. We have updated the website. We're updating the merchandise shop. Scipio's book, Scipio from Dispatches from Reality's book, Anatomy of a Revolution, still for sale on there. You could get your copy. I don't know if we got any more signed copies available, but if we do, hit us up in the email. You might be able to get a signed copy if you guys still order that book. So that'd be super cool. Just wanted to let you guys know that, hey, man, we're out here. We're hustling. We're doing our thing. You know, Alex has been on awesome vacations, hooked up with some of the other firmamentalists. We're doing our thing tonight. We got a great guest going to bring you some great content, but just wanted to remind you guys to continue to support the movement. Continue to support us because we are not airing ads. Yeah, we're working with a couple new sponsors, but these are still things in the making. And remember, we're not hitting you guys with any ads. We're not hitting you with any of this. So if you find it in your heart to support us for all the time that we invest, support the show, donate to the show. We could really use it to do some things and bring you guys and to navigate into some of these new waters and these new realms that we want to bring you guys into. So also we want to raise some money so we could share some money with a firmamentalist out there. That is still a thing. We're still gonna whatever we raise, we're gonna split half with one of our listeners out there. So remember to support the show. The relevant links will be beneath. We're gonna get to introducing tonight's guest shortly, but first I'm gonna let Alex talk to you guys. Any news that he's got for you, and say what's up to the firmamentalist, Alex.
Yeah, I was going to say that Raul keeps talking about LA as a vacation. It's not a vacation; it's a business trip. It's a firmamental business trip, and we recorded. It was totally legit. So, anything that you guys donate coming up, man, you're going to have Firmamental Canada. You're going to have Firmamental New Mexico. You can have Firmamental LA again. All that kind of stuff goes towards making amazing content and doing more video stuff. And yeah, I just think that there's so many amazing things that Firmamental is going to be doing, and the shop's doing well. So keep supporting the merchandise. It's going to be pretty cool one day to go to the grocery store and see somebody rocking a Firmamental shirt. So other than me, I look forward to that day.
Dude, I got to shout out JCW with the Firmamental Protect Your Dome Truckers hat, man. I don't even have one of those. What's up with that?
Right? That blew me away. I was pretty stoked to see that. So everybody took turns wearing that hat. So that's pretty sick.
Yeah, I did see some pictures passed around. But anyways, with no further ado, do you want to introduce tonight's guest, Alex? I'm going to give you the honors.
Sure. Well, we got Instagram, TikTok, band sensation JT Follows JC. Yeah. This guy comes to my stratosphere through Tyler, the Fittest Flat Earther. So shout out to Tyler for turning me on to JT Follows JC. So thanks so much for joining us, JT.
Yeah, of course, man. Appreciate you guys having me. So yeah, I'm not really famous. I might be infamous. No. I mean, obviously, I'm a litany of people who have been banned from TikTok, and I said, if you haven't been banned at least once, I'm actually suspect of are you connected with somebody? No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah. So obviously, I started posting videos a couple of years ago, and yeah, I kind of, probably like a lot of people, I started making videos, conspiracy videos, Christian videos, and you blow up without even expecting to get any kind of audience. And then before you know it, I transitioned to other platforms like Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, making a podcast, all that kind of stuff, even making a movie. But I got banned on, all the while I got banned on the big platform that I was, started on was TikTok. And obviously every TikToker, if you haven't got a backup account, then obviously you really don't have. You're really not a TikToker unless you got at least 2 backups.
Oh, wow.
So luckily I have actually started posting on the backup, and but yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Yeah, for sure. We heard that from Seven Club Cody too. Shout out Seven Club, man. That's my boy. Tyler's my boy, and JT gonna be the new Firmamentalist, and we're so super excited to have you because I absolutely love your videos, man. I love what you're doing, and you look great, bro. I just gotta say, he's got a Jesus shirt on, he's got a trucker hat on, his beard looks clean, and I see the muscles, bro. You're hit.
Well,
You look.
I was trying to get after to, it's funny, before I ever got into making videos and stuff, I yeah, I would, I tried to be like the adult athlete. I did, I did like cycling races, I did marathons, I did like these kind of obstacle course races and stuff like that. And I've kind of been a gym rat, but as I got older, I got injured and stuff. So like, and I I was kind of like, I knew for a long time that I was like, I cannot continue to do this like I did. Like I got a lot of drive from doing that kind of stuff, and like I loved it. But I remember like hurting my foot, I hurt my shoulder, and I'm just like, gosh, I'm getting on the wrong side of 40. Like, can I continue to do this? And praise God that obviously that was a moment in my life where I realized, hey, this is a finite thing. Put your focus on something that's more important. And obviously gave me that, where like as I broke down, it was like I started to do more things. But yeah, obviously I think that I feel like as somebody, even as a Christian, there's different parts of us, mind, body, and spirit. So try to take care of all of them. I would say don't put all your eggs in the body category, because that's the one that's going to fade away the quickest. Mm-hmm. So the next would be the mind. And then there's the spirit that would be, if you're in Christ, it's eternal. So like, it's still important to focus on the body. And so like, I still try to work out, but it gets tough when you make content, you stay up late and you're researching stuff and you're doing all the weird stuff. It's not like back in the day when I would try to get to bed at 8 o'clock, wake up in the morning to work out and stuff. Those days are long gone.
Bro, I literally on my 15-minute breaks and my lunch, like I'll eat a quick little snack and then I'll go outside. We got a workout area at work, and I'll literally the clients and the other staff will make fun of me because I'm literally out there doing push-ups or pull-ups or dips like on my breaks. So and walking around while other people are sitting in the break room or the cafeteria, I'm outside walking around and working out, eating while I'm moving. So hey, Alex, man, why don't you go ahead and jump in and just ask JT whatever you want to ask. And obviously, we want to know a little bit. The Firmamentalist would like to know a little bit more about your video channels, your content, where they could find you. We could talk about this more at the end too. But Alex, go ahead and ask our guests to get it started tonight. Where are we going to take this?
Yeah, well, easy question for me to ask JT is, what are you excited most about right now? Like, what are you passionate about as far as creating content?
Well, I think it's my page has, like I said, I started off making videos about the end times. Like a lot of Christians would say, oh, well, like it looks like the mark of the beast is coming. It looks like, the one world government, all these things are kind of focused toward that. And this is like kind of like growing up in a Christian home, like almost that Left Behind type movie series where you're like, oh, well, gosh, this certainly feels like Revelation's playing out. And at some point, I started making videos about that. And then I started to learn, go more down the rabbit hole. And then eventually people started to say, what about the mud flood? What about Zataria? And what about all this other stuff? And I was like, well, that's really weird, but I really don't quite get it. You get into flat earth stuff and all the other weird stuff. And you're like, I just don't know. Like, okay, so what if they are lying about this? Why would they be lying to us? And that's kind of where my channel has gone. A lot of my friends who have started around the same time there's a interesting part of the book of Revelation, chapter 20. After Jesus already comes back, he defeats, the armies of like the beast armies and the false prophet. They're tossed into the lake of fire. And then there's 1,000 years. And then there's the millennial reign. And then Satan's let out again. And so I remember as a Christian, I've always struggled with like the idea, like why wouldn't God just throw Satan in the lake of fire too? Like that's weird. And how is he going to trick everyone after that? And without ever considering, well, what if it's now? Like, how would we know if it was now? How would we not know? I mean, the devil is obviously, the Bible describes him as being very deceptive. It's not like you have to be stupid to be deceived. It's like almost everyone is deceived by him. Mm-hmm. And so maybe we should give more credit for that. He's a roaring lion seeking who he may devour. And so it wasn't until people started to say, what about those old buildings? Isn't that weird that there's all these buildings that we can't explain? And then we started to see the pictures of the mud flood. And you're like, it wasn't until somebody like phrased it like, what if that's remnants of a millennial reign? And I was like,
Ooh.
and I was like, almost like, yeah, you almost feel like in the pit of your stomach, like something about me knew that made sense, even though I tried to dismiss it for a while. And I think that's kind of where I've kind of eventually, like, I leaned back in the scriptures and I was like, you know what? Jesus actually is saying to everyone, he's coming back in the generation he's coming in. And like he's telling the apostles that he's coming back very soon. And that's why if you read the letters in the Bible, they're all saying he's coming back soon. So they don't know exactly when, but they're all saying, Matthew 24, it says that all these things will be fulfilled before this generation passes away. So like you kind of see that sense of like, it's all happening now. The book of Revelation is like, all of these things are about to happen. The time is at hand. Okay, so that's what we're told is 2,000 years ago. So now it's kind of almost like, well, I started to make, most of my content was based on, hey, everyone is lying to you. Well, what if all those lies are about hiding this massive lie? Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of almost like that. It's literally like the mother of all conspiracies, where it's like all the other conspiracies make sense. It's like the same thing with flat Earth. I'm sure you guys get in that. Well, why would they lie?
Mm-hmm. That's like episode number 2.
Yeah, like, well, why would they lie? And it's like, that is a great reason why they would lie. It's like, if they want to make you confused about where you live, where the geographic locations of things are, like the whole thing, like, why is it all so different? Like, and obviously this all shifted where it's like, everyone says, back in the day, they all thought everyone was stupid. Everyone believed the same thing for all of history. They believed the same thing. And now it's like, now we're really smart. We got big brains now. And we realize how dumb they were, even though they created better buildings than us. They did a lot of stuff. They did stuff that we cannot do with the technology we have when they supposedly had nothing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they weren't stupid, right?
Yeah, one of the things that's been bugging me is the whole population thing. Like since, I guess, 1700 to now, all of a sudden you've had like, let's say 1 billion people on the planet. But now all of a sudden in the last 200 years, we've just like exponentially started to grow. And technology has just exponentially gone. Like something just doesn't add up there. That's the thing that's been bugging me.
I do want to add something. That's a great point. Like from the 1700s to the early mid 1950s, whatever, during that span of time, we had this, population that was in 1 billion, 2 billion. All of a sudden we shoot up to 6, 7, 8 billion. What are we at now? I think 8 billion.
8 or 9.
Right.
What was this Cabbage Patch Baby really a thing? Like where did we just boom? And we're talking at all the times when we had like the Spanish flu, we had all these other supposed pandemics, we had world wars, and you had eugenics going on. So how does the population explode during this time period?
Right. No, that's a great question. I think that, so I've looked this up, and again, I said, obviously you have to rely on the figures we're given, but around the first century, there was only like 100 million people, so like the times of Jesus, there's 100 million people worldwide. That's what they say. Like I said, this is not what I say. This is what they say. By the 1800, the 19th century starts, there's supposedly 1 billion people worldwide. And and like right now, so in a little over 200 years, now we're over 8 times that many. So you go from 100 over 1,800 years.
Yeah.
100 million to 1 billion in 1,800 years. And then you go from 1 billion to over 8 billion in that amount of time. Okay, so what changed? And I think that is where like a lot of us have really tried to say that there's something about the 19th century that makes no sense. That it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Everything happened in this 100 years period where, like, I think that's where, like, so the modern photographer, we're told, I think it started in 1812, 1820 or something like that. The camera was supposedly invented. And so the earliest pictures we have of these big cities from like the 1850s. These massive cities in Europe that look huge. They look like they do today. Like, and I don't know what they say, how many people live there, but they're huge, sprawling cities to go for forever, just like they do today. And except for the buildings look bit, almost look better back then. And then there's mud on the streets. There's no one around. And you wonder, like, it's so eerie when somebody points, it's almost one of those things where, like, if you don't know what you're looking at, you would see that picture and it would be like, oh, that's kind of cool looking picture. But they would say, well, where is everybody? And you'd be like, I don't know. What they'll tell you is, here's what the normies will say. Oh, exposure. Oh, exposure took a long time. It would take like 8 hours to take pictures. So nobody's showing up in the pictures. Are okay. Like, okay, they'd be blurs then.
Right.
Like they'd be blurs. But then there's actually pictures. So there's like Petersburg, I think, St. Petersburg. There's different, I think maybe even different places in Germany that have no people. And then you have like in Paris,
like the Weimar Republic too. That's an interesting one.
Oh, really? Yeah. So in Paris and London, in around the same period, there's people in the pictures. So it's a lot. I mean, obviously that's not true. And obviously they're talking about, I think when the people would talk about exposure, they would say that's what pictures were like when they supposedly just invented the camera. So you're talking about 30 years later. So like obviously there's people in the pictures in Paris and London, and there's not people in all these other big cities. So like, yeah, even like places like San Francisco, like the 1870s, San Francisco's massive. Supposedly there was like 1,000 people in 1850 in San Francisco. By the 1870s, it looks like 1 million people live in the city. It makes no sense. And I think that's when you get into like, okay, so what happened? There's evidence of this mud. There's buried things all around the whole world. Around the whole world. Like this is a worldwide event where like people talk about like Easter Island, right? The Moai statues.
Right.
Where they're like, it was almost just like the other day. Oh, guess what? They have bodies. Yeah, everything is buried under the ground. So they're buried up to their necks. These massive like 30-foot statues. You go around.
So
even like
I gotta ask right here.
Yeah.
Do you think there's bodies underneath that?
Oh well, there clearly is. I mean, they've dug them out. There's evidence of that everywhere. And so like that's where you go into, like you can go into wherever you guys are from, go into your local towns, and if it's an older town, they've got buildings where there is a weird kind of basement that's not really a basement because there's windows that are halfway under the ground and there's halfway above the ground. This is like everywhere. And like cities like Kansas City in America, there's old pictures with dirt everywhere. We were even talking about like biblical places like in the book of Revelation where it's saying that Jesus is telling these cities to repent, and if they don't repent, he's going to come at them with a sword. He's coming back soon. And then the evidence is these places are not only gone, but what they dug up was melted things that were buried under the ground. Like places like Iraq have, you ever seen those famous statues of like, I guess they're like kind of like cherub looking statues. There's a gate and it's got like the beard.
A braided beard. Yeah, like the ones that look on Indiana Jones.
Yeah, so they have those things. It's like this gate. I forget what the gate's called, but I forgot what his name is on TikTok, but it's like the Improbable Dreamer. You guys ever?
Yes,
everyone
follows
him. He just posted a picture the other day where those things are literally completely buried under the ground, like dirt. I mean, these things are like have to be 25, 30 feet tall.
Right.
And they're 100% covered when they were excavating them in the 1850s. So then it's like, so this is obviously when you're conspiracy theorists, the history books do not talk about that. Historians do not talk about that. They don't even try to explain all the dirt, the mud.
Yeah, well, there's the terracotta warriors. I mean, even as a kid, when we're told about the dinosaurs, they're digging way far. Why are the dinosaurs so deep? Like, what happened all these billions of years ago? Why are these like 30 feet deep in the ground, right? Like, just even asking those questions, like, why is everything so like buried so far down, right? Yeah.
JT, before you go off, and I don't want to pull us off track because I want to get back to what you're saying, but dude, you just said something that triggers me right now. You asked him what triggers him. This triggers me. How many millions of people dig holes, whether it's for buildings, swimming pools, canals, farming, all this stuff. Nobody finds dinosaur bones except for these, college institutions on very specific sites. And then they happen to dig these things up, and then, these companies in China remake the bones, and these things go to the Smithsonian, which, by the way, has a Jesuit logo. That bothers me. It never did before. It sucks because I have a 6-year-old son. He just had a birthday. He got all kinds of dinosaur clothes. I can't tell him no, like, oh, we're not accepting that gift. He's still wearing dinosaur clothes, but like, oh, it just breaks my heart now. I used to think Jurassic Park was cool and all this stuff, and now I'm like, ugh. But anyways, back to what you were saying.
I just have a quick solution for Raul. Raul, just make a little incision right here in each of the shirts, and when your son is getting like Hulk Hogan ready, just tear all those dinosaur shirts open. Sorry, JT. I just, dad solutions here.
Isn't it interesting how they obviously, like, you guys are probably just like me. You grew up liking Star Wars and dinosaurs. Like, I mean, like, that's what they teach boys to like. And it's funny. So when I come out and say the dinosaurs are stupid now, like, who do I get? It's a bunch of man babies that get mad. Like, and I'm saying, like, the dinosaurs are literally just a story. It's not a species. It's a story, and it's a stupid one. Because what it really is, it's a placeholder for evolution. So because they want to push the timeline back to a certain place where it's like, I'm not denying that there's creatures, right? They're not. I'm not saying every bone is fake. I know that the bones in the museums are fake, though. So I mean, so what we know is not a lot, because we don't really know. I didn't see what they dug up. I mean, I think in many cases they dug up parts of skeletons and then they recreated a full skeleton. And there's many examples of like modern animals today. If you just found the skeleton, you would have no idea what it looks like. I mean, they give a skeleton to a modern artist and they say, draw this. A good example is like the hippopotamus. You've ever seen that?
Yeah.
The hippopotamus, it's ridiculous looking. And obviously, it'd be the scariest looking dinosaur you've ever seen. But then it's like this.
And actually, they're more closely related to pigs, I've heard, right? They're actually Well,
I mean, you think about it, it's like, what would it? I mean, if you had no idea what a person looked like and you saw a skeleton, what would you draw? It might be reptilian. I mean, my point being is like that. What they really do is they create a story that fits in their evolutionary
narrative.
Timeline.
Yep.
And that's really all it is, because I said the funny thing about dinosaurs is the fact that, okay, so it comes from a Greek word that means monstrous lizard or giant lizard. Okay, so now they say they're birds. Okay, so the name is nonsensical, right, if they were birds, because lizards and birds are not the same things. And so also they supposedly found soft tissue in Tyrannosaurus Rex bones. Okay, so now that they're saying if there's soft tissue in them, they're not millions of years old. So they're not that old, and they're also not lizards. So it's stupid. It's like I said, it's a debunked story is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's just abominations that were created by the fallen angels, hybrid species that got wiped out during this, whether it's the flood or whether it's the mud flood or whatever reset happened. And then it's also giant human remains. Yeah. They don't tell us about the giant human remains that they were finding, because it doesn't line up. It would line up more with a biblical narrative than their narrative, right? And I think all this stuff, like, I think the 1600s was a big period of time when they changed all this stuff and probably pre-planned what they did like in the late 1800s. I don't know. The timelines are all messed up. We know the timelines are wrong, but like you said, it's the same thing. We're left to speculate some of these things, but this is just me. I think that dragons were real, but I don't think that dinosaurs were real. I think that giant human beings are real. I think that they probably don't exist because God wiped them out. But I think that the remnants of these things still exist. So maybe even like something like Sasquatch is a remnant of a leftover creation of these things. And the reason why we can't catch up with these things, first off, the government knows they exist. And there's evidence of these things and a lot of eyewitness accounts. But these things, maybe they do have a woo-woo aspect to them where they can come interdimensionally and leave or dematerialize and stuff like that. But like, I don't believe in the things like you said, like Star Wars. people are mad because their Star Wars dream is dead now. People are mad now because their Jurassic Park dream is dead now. But how cool is a universe uh, in the realm that we live, but with inside of a dome specifically created for us, with all these creations come and gone in a spiritual form, some now coming in the forms of artificial intelligence. And we have a war, spiritual war going on right here, right now. We got cryptids, we got this, we got dragons. Maybe they may return. Maybe giants come from the earth. Like, who knows? Like, it's all left to speculation, just like outer space is, and just like what's outside of Antarctica. We can't go to either of those places either. That's what's so cool about all this stuff to me.
No, and I agree. I mean, I think that what's interesting is how actually the dinosaurs is actually more explainable with the mud flood, because what we're told is these bones and fossils are millions of years old, and they tell you need millions of years old to make a fossil, but that's not true. Scientifically, they found like a cowboy boot with like a leg in it that was fossilized.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
Wow.
what we're taught by science is that mud has to bury things rapidly in order to form fossils. So it's mud and pressure.
Like Pompeii.
Right, right. So exactly. So what if these things are not millions of years old, and what if they are hundreds of years old? And maybe that's why the ancient people, or even not even ancient people, the people 1,000 years ago weren't digging up dinosaur bones, is because they weren't buried under the mud that was just very recent. So if they just started discovering dinosaurs in the 1800s, what if they were just digging up things that were actually not even buried that long? Because it's really about pressure that creates the fossils, the mud and the mud. Because even a lot of Christians, and I was like this the same way as well, that I thought, okay, so anything that was a dinosaur, or whatever people believed to be dinosaurs, would have been something before Noah's flood. Made
Mm-hmm.
sense, and I'm not saying that's not true in all cases, but it is interesting if you think about it. Makes sense to me. If water came up from the deep, water came down from the firmament, you're talking lots of water. I mean, it's not to say that mud's not shifting around too, but now we know. Like, I mean, I think that there's evidence everywhere of mud covering things. So, like, I don't know how much mud is shifting around and covering live animals versus we have evidence all over the place of everything being buried. And like,
Yeah,
what would 200 years do to animal remains?
for sure. And I was just gonna say quick about the population at the time, like way back when. It's like you got all these guys with no skills, no training whatsoever. You give them a chisel and you make them go carve these gigantic buildings for no reason, for no people, right? Like it's just all these
Yeah.
farmers that they just gather up. Like I was watching this thing about the terracotta warriors. Oh, they just grabbed a bunch of slaves or whatever, and then they had these slaves like perfectly crafting these terracotta warriors. And it's like, what? They have no skills, they have no training whatsoever, and they're gonna create these perfect sculptures. Like everybody was an artisan back in the day, even slaves with no training. It's
Yeah,
crazy,
exactly. And I don't know any disgruntled worker that does such precision work. They're going to be like, screw this shit. We're not even getting paid well. Why am I going to do a good job?
right?
The other point that I wanted to make was the point that you made about the flood, right? It said water sprung forth from beneath and above, and that
Mhm.
would change and shift the level of the plane that we live on, right? If you pour it into a container, it will raise it up. So, like, I think the level of water just got raised up. But God
Mhm.
promised us He won't flood us again. So I think we're staying where we're at. That's why pictures from the Statue of Liberty from 100 years ago and now with supposed global warming and
Right,
stuff.
right.
And I had somebody from work the other day, and they were like, oh, global warming, and the icebergs are melting and this and that. And I was like, dude, pull up a picture of the Statue of Liberty from 100 years ago. They boom, so that we pull it up. I said, pull up one now. I said, where's the water level? Oh, it looks the same. I said, exactly. Where's their global warming? I said, dude, if I have a cup of iced tea and I'm chilling at Applebee's watching a basketball game, having a burger, and I got a cup of iced tea and the ice melts, does my cup overflow? It stays the same. Like our plane shifted because the water's sprung forth and sprung. Dude, who knows what the heck is down there?
Yeah,
That's what
that's
I
the real
really
question.
want to know.
Yeah, go look up where Plymouth Rock is still at. You know, so supposedly they didn't have the Industrial Revolution didn't start till much later. So Plymouth Rock is still where on the beach over somewhere, you know, in New England. You know, so no, but I think it's what you're saying too is like the the lies are so obvious when you're actually willing to, you know, bunk the narrative. And you guys ever seen that movie? It's The Prestige.
Yes, it's a Magicians, right? Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, it's a really good movie, but like when Michael Caine is like the narrator and he's diagramming a magic trick, and what he basically saying like that everybody can like making something disappear, the audience does not clap, right? Because you have to bring it back, and that's the prestige. And he's saying like, and he what he says there is like kind of like a little subtlety, and he says, "You're gonna look to see how the trick's done, but you won't see it because you don't want to see the trick." And so if you think about it, like when you go to see a magic show, you want to be tricked. You want to see magic. So that's what the normies do, is that it's not because they're too dumb to know they're being tricked. It's because they want to be tricked. They want to be comfortable in the world they've been told is nice and safe and it's the way it is, but it's not so. The people are lying to you. And then if you realize that people are lying to you, that causes uneasiness, right?
Oh, you hurt people's feelings when you tell them Stephen Hawking's not real.
Well,
he's just a Muppet. He's just a Muppet.
Yeah. Well, Stephen Hawking, who is the other one, is
Neil deGrasse Tyson. I think
is it Helen Keller?
Muppet.
Oh, Helen Keller, yeah.
Helen Keller.
And you know, but like, you know, it's like it's almost the perfect cover now. And actually, I said the same thing with Neuralink. Okay, so like that you give, you know, somebody who's paralyzed Neuralink, and then they're doing stuff with a computer on a TV screen, and I'm like, how the heck do I know if his brain is controlling that? Like, you know, like
right.
They could say it's doing anything. They could say hey, guess what? He's controlling that big robot over there. And I'd be like, okay. I mean, I'm not sure if that's really happening. But no, it is funny, like, because you sound very insensitive when you question
handicapped people. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the people we're dealing with are not stupid in that kind of way too, where they'll sell you a narrative and you want to believe, oh, isn't that amazing? Isn't that so great? And then obviously you go back to doing what you're doing and you're thinking like technology is so grand. But yeah, these people do want to be tricked in this kind of way when I think that's the thing. I'm sure like you guys who obviously when you guys dig into flat earth, the very beginning of me like looking into some of these things, it was like I kind of almost knew instinctively that I was on something before I was even willing to admit that I thought, I think they're lying to us. I was just like, hey, so Polaris, like, so why doesn't it move? And people would start to get mad. You know, like you start to ask like basic questions and you're like, okay, it is kind of weird that like that when we're shown like outer space, all the pictures are fake. So why don't they show real pictures if it's real? And then you like, and this is literally me trying to figure out if they're lying or not. You know, I'm trying to debunk the conspiracy.
Right. Well, it takes us back to the beginning where I like you. I feel like we're in the age of deception now, where everything is inverted, and I don't know how I feel about that because it's like, why am I in the age of deception? Like I want to be in the pre-era and like, oh, Jesus will come, right? It's like, oh boy.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's like, I think when you finally accept it, it's just like, okay, so, I mean, it's funny because like when you think about like, it's the difference is not that much because like the people who don't believe that the rapture has come yet believe that a tribulation's coming. And it's going to be like, people are going to be getting their heads chopped off. It's going to be horrible. All these things, a one world government. Well, in like the post-millennial view, it's like it's very similar in the way that Satan is gathering an army to go fight against Jesus. And we don't really know what that looks like. But I mean, it's not like the people like us are like blind to what's happening. It's like things are deteriorating. I mean, I think that it makes a lot more sense in the way that if there was a peak of civilization, which looks like it might have been about 250 years ago.
I was going to say the 90s.
Music-wise.
Well, I would just say it was funny. There was a meme that got shared the other day, and I shared it. It was like it was Back to the Future. So I was a kid of the '80s, and we're like watching Back to the Future 2, and we're like, oh, this is awesome. There's look at those new Nikes he's got.
Yeah.
They like
The
buckle
hoverboard.
us up. The hover.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody
Yeah.
said we're gonna have hoverboards, flying
Yeah.
cars. We're gonna have all these things, and it's like, quick, let's go to the future. And then it's sort of like, we're in the future. Everyone, let's go back to the 80s. Like,
Right.
let's go back. Let's go back to that time, because even in this short period of time we've lived in,
I got to crack a
like
joke right here because
you can instantly see
I'm
that
sorry.
it's true.
I got to crack a joke right here because the Japanese moon landing video was straight up a ripoff of uh asteroids or Galaga. You
Oh, you
know
mean
that
the Indian one?
Oh yeah, the Indian one. Yeah, sorry, it
Yeah.
was the Indian one. Dude, that was a ripoff of an 80s video game. Sorry, I had to say that because you're talking about let's go back to the 80s. They're now ripping off 80s video games to make moon landing videos.
Well, you think about that movie, was it Ready Player One?
Yeah.
You know, so if you watch that movie, so they're going in this place, the Oasis, which might as well be the metaverse, and everybody's using 80s characters, and it's all this
Right.
80s throwback stuff, and it's like, doesn't that, I mean, like obviously, just think about that in a bigger picture. It's like they live in squalor. They're pretending like they live in a generation where it's like, obviously, even I realized it's rose-colored goggles to look back and say this was so great.
Hmm.
It's at the end of the day, it's like everyone's always said, well, they don't make them like they used to. So that's even when we were growing up. You know, like you think about like those shows like American Pickers, where they're getting old stuff and they're fixing up old things from like the 50s and the 60s. And it's all made of like really quality goods where you could fix them and they would actually just repaint them, like polish them up. And they're like, but yeah, now they make everything with plastic, like, toxic paint. All, like everything that's made now is just literally garbage.
Hmm.
And if you think about it, if technology improves, you should be able to make the things they made back in those days cheaper and faster. But
Mhm.
that's not the case. So what is the rub? And if you go back to that conversation we're having, where's all the people in those pictures? Then you learn like these very weird historical anomalies about orphan trains. Orphan trains, insane asylums, and like that blew my mind. That was one of those conspiracies where I was like, that has got to be fake. Like the incubator babies at the world, or like those fairs, like Coney Island, like that is the weirdest thing. And there's nobody to explain any of that stuff. Where I said that there's zero insane asylums now. Back in 1900 in America, there was 1,500 of them, and there was 150,000 people in insane asylums, and many of them were in there for, I guess they called it religious fanaticism. And then there was 250,000 kids on orphan trains. So you think about it, the population of America now, 300 something million people. Back in those days, it was like what, about 30 million people, somewhere in that range.
Hmm.
So think about, so obviously do the math. So if you multiplied 10 times that, you'd be talking about 2.5 million kids just going around the country. Like, so why were they doing that? Like I said, to me, I made the connection of like, hey, when you see those old pictures, you see those old videos in like the 1800s, and everyone looks like an aristocrat, right? All the women's are got all these bonnets and they got these nice dresses.
They're all dressed
on.
fancy. Like nobody's dressed like a schlub at Walmart, right?
Top hats. Everyone's just kind of like, they all look like tourists in these places. Like nobody looks like they're going to work. And so you kind of make the connection like,
wow,
these people are not working in factories, they're not working in fields. So who's going to do it? These kids. And then you go look up the pictures. There's kids working in factories, kids working in fields, doing weird odd jobs. They're working in like factories where like they're not tall enough to like reach all the levers. They're standing on things to, and I mean, like, okay, so I get it. I get it. Like the wicked businessman who farms out his Nike shop to Thailand or something, like some out in the East, where he's making these shoes for like cents on the dollar, or like literally just cents. But you're also talking about like in America, where I'm in construction. It's a lot of work probably to take care of kids who are working for you, and they're probably not good at doing all the jobs too, right?
Yeah.
So it makes no sense other than the fact that there's no men to do that job, right? We're
Mhm.
taught we're told that these people should have been worrying
with
about bare
industrial
necessity.
equipment that would take
Right.
some manpower and wits to like man, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a man. Well, I mean, you think about it, like what we're taught is these people are taking their horses and buggies to the to the factory. Okay, so
Mhm.
who's collecting all the kids? And are they got recess? I mean, like, what I'm saying, like, this makes no sense to do that. Even like today, like I always say, like the women get paid less. It's like, why doesn't everyone just hire women then? Because I mean, let's be honest. Obviously, like men do certain jobs better than women. Obviously, men and women do better jobs than kids do. So you would never hire kids unless there was no one else to hire. So
Wow.
where were the other people at? And
Mhm.
that's like the real thing where like you're saying like if you look around, you look at the landscape of the mud flood stuff. Obviously, if the buildings are buried like that, how many people were buried under that ground? Like how much carnage was left in that wake and nobody talks about it. Like what we're taught, I think where the timeline is completely just exposed naked, the emperor's wearing no clothes is America. We're taught that this country developed so fast. And if you look at the big cities in America, how could those cities be built without a time of peace and prosperity where like places like Rome, like the great empires of the world defeated foreign armies and they took plunder back and they built their cities. Like obviously it makes sense, right? That
Mhm.
you would go defeat a foreign army, you take gold, plunder all the riches back, you would take slaves, and then you'd build these places
Yes.
up to make a monument to the generals, the emperors, and all the people that. Well, in America, supposedly we fought a Revolutionary War in the late 1700s. In the early 1800s, we fought the British again. They burned our capital down, and then like we're taught that like Lewis and Clark didn't go across the Mississippi until the beginning of the 1800s.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, all these great cities are being built, and then they have these amazing like courthouses, state capitals, city capitals, you know, everything like all these state building cathedrals. They're all being built at the same time, and you're like, okay, so this is what we're taught is there's no income tax in those days. Who's paying for this? We're taught that the founding fathers did not want strong governments. They literally threw tea in a harbor supposedly because they didn't want to pay taxes. So then, meanwhile, they create a government where they build Washington, D.C. to look more magnificent than Rome does, like now.
Mhm.
I got a
It
question
makes
about
no
that.
sense.
So if you look at geographically, if you look at the United States and you look at the southern United States, right? Like you got the Creole people, which like speak French. You got like French up in Canada, and then you got
Mm-hmm.
like the Spaniards over on the West Coast, Spaniards here in Arizona and New Mexico, which conquered Mexico, and you got the French over there in the Caribbeans. You got the British over here in the Northeast. Like, so how does all that work? Like with what we're saying, like how do you have all these different like dialects and all this stuff going on in recent history, according to their history? But how does that work with what we're saying?
Well, no,
Do you think it's a Tower of Babel type thing?
I think it's all a lie. I think it's almost all of it is a lie. I think that there was established cities in this part of the world, and they went over there, and then they created a completely new narrative about how it
Mm,
was because if you go look at old maps have like places like Chicago on them.
Mhm.
Like when we're taught they shouldn't have had any real like why
Mhm.
would it be put on a map before it became Chicago like we know it?
Mhm.
They say that Chicago didn't get started getting built in like the 1850s, 1860s.
And then they had a
But
fire, and then they had to rebuild it, and
every place in America had a great fire, like every one of them. And so like when you understand like I think there was a pretty decent little documentary just came out. It was called The Old World Order, and they talk
by
about
the
like
way, I did the song that plays at the end. That's me.
oh nice, very very nice. Yeah, so in that movie like they
Sorry, I
make
had to brag. I had to brag right there.
well they make a point to say that if these cities were built of stone and brick would not burn from fire. I mean, when you think about like,
Mhm.
hello, look at your. I
Yeah,
mean, if you got an old house, look
fireplace.
at look at your fireplace. They don't melt unless it gets really hot. So so we're talking about the Chicago fire was like
Direct energy weapons.
a cow kicked over a lamp, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
it burned the whole city down. But what's funny about those stories too is like that they don't talk about, oh well, and 100,000 people died. They don't talk about anyone dying, and they show pictures of the cities, and they look like Dresden during World War II, like a city that was bombed. I mean, because it looks like bombs went off in those pictures because you're seeing like parts of buildings, not melted buildings, parts of them. They're all it's wreckage, and so these people obviously they're very resilient. Not only do they build these magnificent places with not a lot of equipment, but they built them twice, and sometimes in cases three times. Like San Francisco again, you go into that place had multiple great fires and a great earthquake, and so you're like, it just like I said, it does not it
Right.
makes no reasonable sense.
Well, and they
And
teach us about cowboys and Indians, and then building a railroad. Right. That's what they teach us.
what's funny too is like if you actually see the pictures of them building the railroads, what you see a lot of cases, they got shovels because they're digging up railroad tracks that were buried. I remember seeing this, and this is one of those things that I didn't make a connection till later.
Hmm.
I liked those shows. I mean, I liked the older I got, I started liking history shows, and I was there. I think the History Channel had this kind of like I don't know what they call it, like a docudrama, and it was called The Men Who Built America, and it was all about like Rockefeller, Carnegie,
Oh my
JP
God.
Morgan. No, but it was interesting because I was just like, because I never heard these stories in school about how America was actually created. You mean here you skip from like the founding to like the wars and like the Civil War, and then then modern times. It's like that's kind of how.
Yeah.
And so they started to show
Yeah,
like
that
that
is.
these guys like the capitalist mindset built all the infrastructure to the country. And at one point, they started talking about Vanderbilt and how it was almost like the railroads were always about to go to business. And I was just like, well, does this make any sense? It's like, so Vanderbilt, Cornelius Vanderbilt, he was called the Commodore because he was like the biggest shipping guy in the whole world. He sold all his shipping stuff and bought into the railroads. And then they kept on making emphasis that the railroads were overbuilt. And therefore that's like it was like a bad thing. There was too many railroads. And I was like, wait a minute. So they keep on going back to Rockefeller, who would buy down, he would buy like refineries in order to shut them down. I think like Carnegie too, where he would buy out, so towns would be based around these factories. They would buy them, shut them down just so they could make more money at the ones they had. Meanwhile, the railroads were overbuilt, and I was like, well, why don't they just not send the trains to those places? How could they ever have overbuilt them in that short amount of time? Unless they were already there.
Yeah.
Unless they were already there. I mean, it makes more sense that they were already there because, like, why would they care? Like, why would you'd only build a railroad from a big city to a factory or to another big city? And if it wasn't, until it was feasibly financially, you wouldn't do it.
Right. For sure. Why build a road to nothing? Right.
Right. Well, you wouldn't build the road before the city was there. But I mean, I think that's a thing where, like, even before you get into all the cities and how the buildings don't make sense, you also have to see, like, you see in the Hollywood movies stuff like Tombstone. We're taught about the Old West, where it's like guys
Tombstone,
are cussing
Arizona,
and shooting. Yeah, cussing and shooting in the dirt, and then like obviously everyone's playing poker and
I
just getting
spit on the
drunk.
ground and challenge you, son. We'll take 10 paces and turn around and shoot each other.
The Wild West is what we're taught is like. I mean, I said as a kid, it makes sense. You're like, okay, so obviously these people, they're just pretty nice when we're seeing their shows, but like, yeah, that's what you picture about the 1800s. But what's interesting is like you find out like all the cowboys are kind of contemporaries to each other because it was really only like a little small generation of time. Wyatt Earp actually lived into the times of early Hollywood. He's actually teaching John Wayne to be a cowboy in the like
On the
1920s.
silver screen. On the
Right.
silver screen.
and so that's what you think that. So in our mind, that's what we think about the 1800s is like that's what it is. But meanwhile, I said literally San Francisco has got 1 million people. At the time, Tombstone is the shootout in the OK Corral is happening. Okay, so but like I said, what people don't get is like, okay, so they say there's a gold rush, right? And so people go out west. All these cowboys, all these wagons, all this stuff. And are they just building wherever they want? well, how do all these cities have these like completely centrally planned cities with docks and ports and canals and all the things, unless somebody took a lot of time to plan these things out? Well, they were already there. I mean, that's I said that's the only thing that makes sense. They were already there, and then obviously there is more rustic places in the United States, which there still are. So Tombstone makes sense. It's not a complete lie, but it's a lie to try to say it was the Wild West. It's kind of like here's one town, here's a couple towns in Arizona that are rough, and that's about it.
My hometown of Las Vegas, New Mexico, has more history than Tombstone. I'll tell you that. Go research this place. But hey, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about Zeppelins and airships?
Well, I think it fits all in the lines of like it actually. I've seen more videos about that, and it makes sense that like, well, how were these things planned out? Like you think about things like star forts. If you guys got into researching that stuff, you guys looked into that at all?
No, not yet.
Well, well, there's these kind of like it's kind of like the that's what I was saying. You get into like the idea that the land is terraformed in some kind of way where it only makes sense when you actually see it from higher up. Okay, so we're taught they didn't invent the plane until like what sometime in the late 1800s, right?
Right.
And so what were they doing? We're all shown that image, and it's funny, like it's one of those things that does feel like it's burned into our brain, the Hindenburg disaster.
Right.
Like why should we even care about that as like in the days we grew up? But it's almost like don't even try that stupid idea. Don't ever try to put that stuff in there. Like those airships were a disaster. It was a stupid idea.
Well, when we were kids, the Goodyear blimp was like a staple at every football game or something. And now, do you ever see the blimps anymore? No.
Well,
But
it's funny that I think that again, I'll give credit to the Bravo Dreamer that I think that in our minds when I saw Zeppelin, I assumed it was like similar to a blimp. So what a blimp is obviously it's this big old kind of balloon basically, and it's got a small little cabin on the bottom of it. But those airships actually were like you could fill them up. They had room. It was almost like a flying yacht where
Mm.
you could kind of have like a comfortable travel where you were going because yeah, they weren't just completely hollowed out. They were actually had things you could put stuff in them.
oh wow.
And so it makes sense. And actually, I said it makes perfect sense. It obviously does seem much more safe than when you think about how a normal engine works these days, where it's like literally works by explosions and things like that.
Hmm.
And the fuel's not hot enough to melt steel beams, but it's still pretty hot and it burns. But you know what I'm saying? Like that you could dock in the top, you have these mooring stations, you have all these tops of these spires and these buildings, and I mean, it makes sense. I mean, obviously, the Bible tells us in the Ecclesiastes chapter 1, there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, you think even like so, you get into like the ancient alien stuff, and they talk about the Nazca lines, out down in South America, and you're like,
Ancient airport.
well, you're just like, so who made that? First of all, these lines are straight; they go forever.
Trinkets
Nobody,
of like of
nobody
like
made that without being
yeah.
able to see it from above. So how did they see it from
Yeah.
above? So I mean, it's likely that the point, you get into like obviously the flat Earth stuff, and it's like if you don't believe in gravity and you believe in buoyancy and density, these people are not. These people were never stupid.
Or
I think
electrostatics.
right, but you think about it. I think that's one of the first lies I realized very early on that people were never stupid. People were never primitive. There's been times where obviously there's been resets and people have been ignorant, but in general, like there's been knowledge that goes. I mean, if you think biblically, if Adam walked with God, you think Adam was stupid? Adam lived for 900 years. He's walking with God, all the things they could have done before the flood, the things they probably knew after the flood. I think the evidence that they were not primitive was the buildings. So if our state capitol building looks like a Roman capitol building, well, maybe our technology is not actually that different, right? So maybe what we're basically taught is that, oh, well, they knew how to do that, but they weren't smart enough to make tools to make it easier. They could do all the things we could do. They just didn't know. They never found out an easier way to do it, or they didn't have an iPhone.
Hmm.
But
That was
other
one
than
of the
that,
things that killed me. That was one of the things that killed me too, though, is that they say they carved these marvelous stones that on I forgot what the scale is called for like the hardness of a rock, but they supposedly were carving stones that were harder on the Mohs scale, I think it's called, with tools that were softer than the ones that they were
Right.
using to build the buildings. It doesn't make sense.
Well, what they say is like it would be like that if there was a cataclysm again, which is obviously not hard to imagine, and you lived outside of Washington D.C. and like so you built your house with the tools, or like everybody in everybody's house, we got a small amount of tools at our house, and there was a cataclysm. There's parts of like the state capitol building, the Washington Monument left, and they found like a hammer, like a screwdriver. They found like a hacksaw. Well, obviously they must have built these structures with those tools because this is what we found next to them. When you realize that no, people kind of made their structures near these places. So if they had copper tools, it's what they had. It makes more sense to somebody who's thinking logically. Well, obviously they could not have built those things with this, so somebody else built them before or after. I'm not sure. Or maybe they took the tools and took them to other place after they left. But no, yeah, the copper tools that are not as hard as the rocks they're supposedly cutting into, again, logically makes no sense.
I keep thinking that there's multiple resets, and that one part of me, I was watching my lunch break, and I saw this video, and it just like popped into my head. I'm like, I wonder if, let's say God only allows a certain amount of population, and then that's what triggers a reset, or some, let's say 10 billion, and the crazy elites, they're just like trying to like kill as many of us so we don't hit that magic number to trigger the next reset. And that's why they're building these bunkers, just in case they can't like stop the, what do they call that, geometric progression of our population.
Well, I think what it could be, I think that I don't disagree with you. Actually, I started to come to this conclusion where, so Ezekiel chapter 30 talks about the day of the Lord. And so a lot of Christians would believe the day of the Lord is the last day on Judgment Day for like the whole thing. But if you read into that chapter, it's saying the day of the Lord is coming to Egypt. And it mentions specific cities. And like there's actually a city that I can show you the evidence of it. It's called Zoan in the Bible. But biblically, you can even historians agree it's Tanis, which would have been the capital of Egypt. And it's this megalithic site, and it's completely burned and destroyed. It's crazy. Like there's a foot of a statue that's probably about 8 feet long, and there's nothing else to the statue where it's broken up. There's like sphinxes looking things where they're burned.
Is it six-toed? Is it six-toed? I gotta ask.
No, it's only got 5 toes. But I mean, you can. The statue had to weigh more than 1 million pounds. Like if it
Colossus.
Yeah, and it was just. But all it was left was a foot, and then everything else was kind of strewn about, like megalithic stones knocked over everywhere. And so, like the Bible specifically calling this place out, the day of the Lord is coming to this place. But it mentions that Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon are going to carry out this judgment. So what I started to understand is maybe the day of the Lord is literally like judgment is coming to that day. It's the day of Lord's judgment on this place. So biblically, we're looking at Israel because that's what it's talking about. It's like Jerusalem's going to be destroyed, and then Rome's going to be destroyed. But like if you go backwards, you can look at Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the example is, I think that is kind of the example for us. Is like that. Even it mentions in the beginning of Genesis that God gave that city time. It's not time yet. And even, Abraham's negotiating with God saying, what if there's 50 men? What if there's 30? What if there's 20? What if there's 10? And God's saying, if there's that many, I'm not going to destroy it. So, I mean, I think biblically, it's a time where it's like this place is beyond hope, and God will bring his people out. But I mean, it's time for judgment. So I do believe that I think there's good evidence that is the case. But I think that's when you get into like the mud flood, though, and you're like, because it is so like there's evidence everywhere, and it all does seem like to be around the same time period. I mean, that's the unfortunate part is that we cannot trust. For one, there's no writing about it, but for two, it's like we cannot trust the mainstream historians, so we can't. It's hard to piece these things together of when they happen, why they happen. Is this an example of God's wrath on the earth, or like some of us are starting to wonder, does this coincide with Satan being released from the earth, from the bottomless pit, and
Tartarus.
that's what caused this kind of chaos on the earth. I mean, I think it's. I mean, I guess it's. I mean, at this point, I would say there's no way to know, but maybe obviously we're just kind of just getting into this kind of research.
Well, I don't think we have to wake up 100% of the people, but what we're doing and what we're, growing, the speed at which we're growing, there's some days where I feel like, oh yeah, we got this. Until I go out into the town, I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I am still the 0.1%, but I really do feel like there is this conscious shift and people are kind of being forced to wake up, whether they know it or not. Maybe it's not to everything, but they know that the governments are corrupt. And once they start waking up to that, and then they start seeing the weather modification, that's a huge wake up call.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you modifying the weather? Now they're starting to admit it. And then once they wake up to the food being poisoned, and then Bill Gates buying up all the farmland, it's like, wait a minute, something's eventually we'll get enough 20-30%, and eventually something's got to change or something's got to happen.
Well, I think the one thing that they've got us, and I would say like from my perspective, is like that by the time I woke up, I got so many responsibilities. It's kind of like that. You got kids, you got bills, you got all these kind of things. It's like if I could do it again now, and I try to tell this, I was trying to tell my daughter this the other day. You know what? I wouldn't even go to college. I would try to do something what everyone else is doing. I would do the opposite, go the other way. Like like they're trying to sell you a dream that's a nightmare now, and it's way old. If that ever worked, it was a long time ago. What I would suggest most people do is not plant the root so deep where they are not invested into this system. And that's what they got you. Like we're free roam slaves right now. Like we can kind of go around, but we're still stuck in the place we're at. But I mean, I think that's the more difficult part, because I get that myself, is like that. So what do you do with all this knowledge other than just kind of like continue to research it and tell people about it? Just don't put your faith in these people. That's for one thing, we should have never trusted these people at all. And if you vote, you know what? Just know it probably doesn't mean anything. Like I know that's a black pill, but it's also comforting in the way that it's not going to wreck your day. It's not going to wreck your week. It's not going to wreck your month or your year when you're like your guy doesn't win, or you think he won and he got screwed. Like I said, it's not meant to be.
I would agree with you there. And I think this has been the biggest epiphany for me coming into where I'm at now, is just over these past couple years, the first year doing this research to lead me to going on like George Hobbs' show and like being on Flat Earth Files and Fact Hunter, and him motivating me to get this podcast started. And now where we're at in this point of the podcast. But it's like those last few years, if you would have talked to me right before that started, I would have been like, yo, I'm a conservative. I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I was caught in the right and left paradigm. And now I'm like, I realize these are, two wings of the same bird. And I'm like, people ask me now, well, aren't you going to vote? Well, yeah, I'll probably vote but I'm not going to vote for like either one. Right. Because I don't want to be like responsible, like say, like if I voted for this guy and he ruins our country, like, oh shit, I'm part of the problem because I voted for this guy and now he destroyed.
Did you
our
ruin
shit.
something that's already been ruined?
Yeah, exactly. But
Right.
like I don't believe in it. But this is where, like what you were talking about, this is what I think that we do. And it's like, since starting to this podcast, we've talked to people, because our podcast is not just flat earth, it's not just conspiracy, it's like alternative medicine, it's like alternative way of thinking, it's conspiracy analysis, it's all this stuff. But it's like forming our own schools, forming our own communities, starting from within. Like start from the community you live in, disconnect from their everything that they're feeding us. And I tell people to watch this stuff with social media, because you have to have like a diverse algorithm, right? Because if you're only looking at one thing, you're only getting fed the people that have that same point of view. So we need to look at like different points of view to still be open-minded, to have discussions with other people, because we need to be able to formulate our arguments by hearing both sides and making sense, what makes most sense to us. But this is what I say. It's like grow your own food, raise your kids. Don't let the state raise your kids. Educate your own kids. Even if you don't have the resources to send them to to homeschool them or to send them to a private school or whatever, like when they go to the indoctrination camp, when you come home, don't send them to a room with a TV tray to play video games and just feed whatever like YouTube algorithm. Like talk to each other, start with your own community, converse with your neighbors, grow your own food, like do all this stuff. Stop taking pharmaceuticals, stop doing this, don't overdrink, everything in moderation, but just like let go of fear, because fear is anti-faith. And just like have faith and start from within. And if we all just did that, they would really lose control overnight.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, no, you're on it. I mean, I think that that's the main thing. It's like that, people are relying on people are really not trying to help you. They're literally trying to undermine us. And it's like, I think it is kind of almost like that. I mean, at some point you do kind of have to try to play the system as well as you can. But no, I think that that's like, we've given over our authority to like our safety, our health, and to people who obviously have our kids, people who do not have our best interests, literally have the opposite in mind. And I think that, I mean, I think it started with, for a lot of people, it was 2020. People woke up, and we're at the talking phase right now. I mean, where is that going to lead to? We're obviously, at the same time, do not be in an echo chamber, like you said, because I think my buddy and I, we actually did a podcast last night talking about the fact that we decided the news was fake. And then so we became the news, and then we became the fake news, where like people started getting paid to make videos now. And ask for the receipts. Do not trust these people. Do not trust me. Do not trust anybody on a podcast just because they got a big following. It's that the alternative might necessarily not be right as well. And I think that overall, like, God's given you a brain. God's given you discernment. Use it, and don't be afraid to like look into things. And also don't be afraid to say you don't know. Don't be so cocky. I think that's where a lot of creators kind of really get lost, where it's like, okay, they're lying, but doesn't mean you're right either. So like just be willing to have enough humility to say, I don't know a lot. I'm still in the researching phase. And if you admit that, then you actually have an opportunity to learn. But the people who know it all, they're not going to learn anything. And, and eventually they're going to be exposed at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I always wake up and I question myself. Am I doing more harm than good? Am I making conspiracy porn? Am I doing what I should be doing? Would I be proud if my parents listened to our podcast? I ask myself all these kinds of questions. It's like, would I want my kids to hear what we're creating? And it's like, oh, okay, maybe there's some episodes where it's like, oh man, we kind of got off the rails there, but at least I'm honest enough to check in with myself. And I know Raul does the same thing. And I'm always doing the did I sell out checklist. I'm like, did I sell out? Did I sell out? Raul, how are you doing? Did you sell out? And I think that's, I don't know. What do you think, Raul? I think that's what keeps us strong, right? Just checking ourselves constantly.
Well, I think that what makes Firmamental different, and I don't mean to brag, JT, and I don't know if you've listened to our previous episodes, but like, yes, I am a follower of Jesus, but or Yeshua or whatever you want to call it, but I am very upset with the corporate Christianity. I'm very upset with the direction of the church. I think it's dead. I think it's going down this pathway. I think there's so much deception, and I think it's been infiltrated. I lost interest when they started with the 6 feet apart. You can't lay hands on one another. I'm like, what God do you serve? Government or your Lord, which says like love one another, pray for one another, lay hands on one another. Like I saw through that, and I haven't been. Well,
they were willingly labeled non-essential. And yeah. They became that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like with our podcast, like, dude, I've said this on a recent episode. I think more people are getting saved through podcasts, and it's sad to say, but I think more people are getting saved through podcasts than church right now. And more people are hearing more truth in podcasts than they are in church now, right? Now, I'm not saying that the podcast is more important than the church, but what I'm saying is if you try to shut God off on one way and top him off, his smoke is going to permeate, and the Holy Spirit is going to find another way to fill that vessel. Okay. But like that's like what Alex is talking about. I really believe that's what makes our show so dynamic, is because we're willing to talk to all these people with all these different points of views, and we just have a conversation, and we let you guys listen to the conversation and make up your own mind after you listen to it. We're not trying to sway your mind one way or the other. So like I'm proud of that, because like yeah, my mom's like the best, what you would call a Christian. My mom's probably like the epiphany of what like a Christian should be. Like I look at her of the mother spirit of our family, right? That's like the cornerstone of our family, keeping us together right now. I've lost my dad in 2008, but like we have friends that aren't sold on certain aspects, are sold on certain aspects, bring different points of view. Some people, dude, we've had flat earthers, non-flat earthers, people that think that it's a forever extending realm, people that think that it's a dome, people that are with the dinosaurs, not with the dinosaurs, Genesis 6, all these things, but just different points of view. But let's sit down and talk about it and have a conversation. And that's the thing, open up the conversation. I think that's what church was always intended to be, was to be not just one person in a pulpit dispensating everything as the one vessel telling everybody what represents God.
Amen.
It should be
Amen.
everybody participating in it, and then having a discussion, and then making the most sense of what we were given, the seeds that we were given, and then trying to grow something out of it.
No, amen, brother. Yeah, I'm with you there, because I think that I don't think I think it's awesome that more people are getting saved from like listening to podcasts. Because I think the one thing that the brick and mortar churches became, I mean, I'm not saying they were always bad, because I don't know that. I'm not going to say that I know that. But the way I perceive it is, it's a 1 week, a 1 day a week thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening to a podcast and God changed you in your own room, like I said, like I got changed, obviously without listening to a podcast, but I mean, like I changed my own room. Well, I made a change in my own house, and I kept it going daily since then. And then when you start to make create a relationship with God in your own house daily, then you go to a church, and then you realize that this was never meant to fill me up spiritually every week. This is, at best, it can be part of that. And I think that we all long for a fellowship. And I think that's why podcasts are good. I think maybe we need probably more actually real IRL interaction with people, with other believers, if we can get it. But I think that
conferences, like you said, we're going to do a conference with you one day, JT. We
are.
Oh,
I'd love to, man. I'd love to. Actually, me and my buddy were talking about doing one of those today. But yeah, I would say that I believe that Jesus is the truth, and talking about things, and if people are willing to accept the truth, it will always lead back to Jesus. And I think that, but I do think, I think it's great that you guys think like that, because I think the same thing, where I think if we're all being honest, and this is me being completely real, hopefully your heart is leading you to, like, I have an idea of what I'm doing here. I'm trying to expose lies. I'm supposed to tell the truth. Ultimately, I'm trying to lead people toward Jesus. But you also know the algorithm. So if I talk about that thing that everyone wants to talk about, even if I don't really care about it, maybe I can get some clicks, and then maybe more people will hear the show that I want to talk about. People get lost doing that. And I said, I've seen people I know do that kind of stuff, because you're chasing that algorithm in order to get big. And then before you know it,
conspiracy porn. Conspiracy porn.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, literally, that's what we were talking about last night. Where like I tried to avoid talking about the April 8th thing, but eventually it started getting too weird, so I started talking about it. And
hold on, April 8th or January 6th?
No, April 8th, the eclipse.
The eclipse.
Oh, okay.
Everyone was talking about like the end of the world and all the weird stuff. And I was kind of hedging, but I'm just like, I know that that's what people want to talk about. And I was not trying to scare people in the way, but like, I know that like fear drives people. And again, that's how the governments of the world lead us, because they keep us in this constant trauma state. And so we don't want to be doing that. And I think that I said that we were saying this last night. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding, or beginning of wisdom. Fleeing from evil is understanding. So like, it's okay to be afraid if you're not right with God. I mean, I think that if I said something that scared you, well, yeah, I mean, obviously I'll tell you where to go to get rid of that fear. You don't need to be afraid. But at the same time, like certain people are like pushing this constant fear on people where it's like, yeah, the mark of the beast, World War III, massive hurricanes or earthquakes and natural
Hmm.
disasters. And it's like, so what is somebody to do about that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, certain fear is not good. I think certain fear is good in the way that if you know where you should go, it's kind of like the idea if you have a deadline at work, you got a test tomorrow. Well, you should probably just study. You should probably just get your work done. And then you're
Yeah.
done. And then you're not afraid. All that anxiety goes away. God has given us a healthy dose of like fear and anxiety to get us to do what we're supposed to do. But it's not just to be afraid.
Hmm.
Like that's not good. That's
Well,
not of
Yeah.
God. And
but
I
that's
think,
what the news is. It's pushing our energy in a certain direction they want it to go. And I honestly feel like there's less and less people paying attention to the news, so they're getting desperate. Now they're going to have to go to social media and infiltrate all of our feeds through social media to
mhm.
try and push our energy in different directions to the biggest thing is the division, right? Like they will try and
Yeah.
divide us any which way possible. Doesn't like if they can find a way to divide me and Raul, they will try and find it.
Hmm.
Right? Honestly,
Hey, I'm
like
brown and you're white, bro. We can't get along.
done. It's over.
We just can't. We can't. What the hell? You're a Canadian and I'm a Chicano in New Mexico. How the hell are we supposed to get along?
Exactly, exactly. But according to the news, like they're trying to speak these things into existence, and I called it out too. It's like I don't even like the guy speaking revelation into existence. Like I keep saying,
Yeah.
like it's not on my watch. Like if I'm gonna go down like swinging, like if God's gonna come and save us because I shit the bed and left the factory a door unlocked, it's like oh my goodness, I don't want to get fired. Like I want to do the best I can to protect this house.
Well, I think that I
Protect your
think that
dome,
that's
son.
we've been talking about that a little bit, like in the idea that let's just say that we're not leading toward the tribulation. I do think that that has left a lot of Christians kind of just it's going to happen anyway, like without
Yeah,
even
that's bad.
trying,
That's
without
bad.
even
Yep.
trying to make things better. When it's kind of like that, even if you believe that, it doesn't mean like I'm not telling you like this is one of those old school movies where like somebody needs to go kill the Antichrist in order to prevent the end of the world. Like it's not like that where it's just like, hey, you should be doing more to make this place better because what if tomorrow is not the end? And I think
Hmm.
it's made a lot of complacent Christians where it's like we've just kind of just well, that's the end. Where like I said, whether you want to vote or not, where it's like that. Well, if you vote, it doesn't matter because the tribulation is about to start next week.
Yeah, like
Yep.
creating a bunch of nihilists almost, just sitting around waiting for
Right.
the end of the world.
Well, it's like it almost makes sense that if the enemy has the playbook, well, obviously they have access to the same Bible you do. What if they were kind of slowly, it's like the tail wagging the dog, or if they're trying to lead you around of thinking you're in this constant state of like the tribulation is going to start, the tribulation is going to start, and then you're kind of putting your eggs in a different basket when you realize, hey, you know what? Maybe they're wrong, and maybe I need to just kind of just do my best to avoid the noise. It doesn't mean be unaware of what's happening around you, but it means like take care of what's in front of you each day. Like, hey, you might be here for a while, or you might not. Like either way, it's like you're not living like you're gonna max your credit cards out because you're gonna be gone tomorrow, but you're also living like, hey, I'm living within my means and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And if we all did that, maybe this place wouldn't suck so bad.
Hmm.
Hey, JT, man, this has been a killer hour and a half. We were so happy to have you on our show, brother. Um, we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. I got something that I got to take care of tonight. So we are going to wrap this thing down, but I want you to talk to the firmamentalists and just let them know where they can find you because and honestly, brother, I would love, 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 love. I know Alex would. I know the firmamentalists would. We'd love to have you back for round two. And
Sure.
we would love to even like collaborate with you on your platform. But just leave us with where we could find you and your final thoughts and your final goodbyes to the firmamentalists.
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube, Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on all the kind of the regular podcast apps, TikTok. Typically you can find me JT follows JT at JT follows JC on pretty much everything. If you find me on anything, I usually have a link tree in my bio. You click and find all the other apps. I'm doing more stuff on YouTube. Actually, I got a documentary movie called Ancient Angels as well that's still for sale. We talk about Nephilim, angels. It's a play on the ancient alien stuff. But yeah, we're talking a lot about kind of like where are we at? Where are we? Who are we? What have been lied about? And as far as I'm concerned, everything's kind of open for discussion. So if you guys are interested in finding out more, rooted in the biblical truth, that's like, obviously you'll probably enjoy the content. And obviously I hope to do this again because this was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks so
Dude,
much.
You're awesome. Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thanks to JT, and I'm definitely going to check out that movie, and I encourage all the Firmamentalists out there to support other creators as well, and support us, and that's how we win this war, right? Supporting each other and keep on growing, because the less money that Netflix gets, the better it is for us. The less money that Amazon gets, the better it is for us. Like, support guys that are actually like on your side and doing things for you. So yeah, thanks so much,
Amen.
JT. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I'll hook you guys up. I'll go send you guys some free codes for that. You guys want to check it out?
When you make the second movie, I'm gonna do a song for you. You got this? Dude, so go watch Old World Order again. The song at the end, that's your boy right here. So if you like that song, I'm gonna make a song for you too. But anyways, hey, thank you so much for joining us. That's a shameless plug right there. But yeah, go follow JT, follows JC. He is amazing, dude. Dude, this was one of the, like, for me, one of the funnest episodes, and it was very conversational in nature. So I think we talked a lot about a plethora of subjects. So I hope you guys were entertained tonight. Once again, thank you, JT, for joining us. And you guys already know the routine. This is Firmamental, baby. Protect your dome, and we'll see you next time. Peace.